Hello guys, how we doing? So in today's podcast episode, I'm going to talk to you about how to get a super strong neck. We're going to talk about why you would do such a thing, like what is the importance of having a strong neck. I'm going to talk through some of the research, just giving you a quick kind of whistle-stop tour of what's out there at the moment, what we know and what we don't know. And then we're going to get into the training and how to actually put those things in place. All right, so the first thing to kind of put out there is I think neck work has kind of taken a little bit of a spotlight in discussions around athletic performance, particularly when we start thinking about contact and combat sport athletes. So if we think about contact sports, so boxing, Muay Thai, MMA, all those things, having a strong neck is first and foremost going to help you. Or our thoughts are that it's going to help you to not get as many concussions, potentially may even impact your resilience to get against knockouts. That's not necessarily proven. But if we think about, jiu-jitsu and MMA and all those types of things, when you do use your head and your neck as essentially an extra limb, an ability to maneuver your opponent, control positions by having a really strong head position is super important, not just from an injury standpoint, but actually just to have that as a tool in your tool belt to force positions and help with your success on the mats or in the cage. Okay. So from a combat standpoint, there's definitely rationale there, of just being able to use that as an extra limb. When we think about contact sports athletes, so let's think rugby and American football, let's go with those two for now. There has been some research that basically outlines neck strength as being a preventative measure against concussions. Okay, so concussions, which has also been kind of proven to link towards CTE. Okay, so CTE is essentially a brain disease. Okay, so it is progressive, it is fatal, and it does have risk factors to do with dementia, some psychosis, and definitely been some more popularized cases around suicide and serious mental health illnesses. So when we think about neck strength, in that case of what it can do is help reduce concussion risk. Okay, and there's some stats around that. So Collins in 2014 basically put out this paper, which was probably one of the first of its kind, I believe, which gets quoted all the time, is a smaller neck, okay, so less circumference, less girth, a lower neck to head ratio, okay, so the size of your neck in comparison to the size of your head, and weaker neck strength in general is generally a higher risk factor for concussions. Okay. And what we find as kind of numbers is for every 1 pound of neck strength, okay, so 1 pound is not a lot, it's half a kilo. For every 1 pound of neck strength gained, it reduces the concussion risk or the occurrence of a concussion by 5%, which is pretty huge. Like you can gain half a kilo's worth of strength super, super easy, even in realistically a well-trained individual in a well-trained movement, you can gain half a kilo in no time at all. And particularly when you start thinking about neck strength for a lot of people is undertrained. So you've got that novel stimulus, those noob gains, when you first start training something, you will make progress super, super quick. So to gain 5% per, pound, that's a really good return on investment for sure. There's also other research out there, but I think the Collins paper is definitely more researched. So Farley basically said that neck extension strength, so being able to push your head back by gaining 10% of neck extension strength, you reduce the concussion risk by 13%. Okay, so again, it's another strong stat, as a reason to get stuck in with this. Okay. So when I think about neck strength, then there's always this little bit of a trade-off I feel between is it overrated or is it underrated? Okay, and I think for some people at some point it may be an overrated thing. Okay, it's great that it has neck concussion and there's so much research into this that you might be thinking, okay, I need to do that for every athlete, and I really need to put a lot of worth in that. And that's true. You might want to, providing that there is sufficient rationale for that. I don't think it's going to be a game changer. I don't think, if you have one session a week with an athlete, you want to put 20% of your training time towards training neck over your squats, your hinges, your pushes, your pulls, your ankle work, that might not be a really good return on investment. It might not. But I don't think that should, just to give you a little bit of context around, okay, let's think critically. Even though there's a lot of research that says it's important, we can't always tick all boxes at all times, okay? If you have 4 or 5 training sessions a week with a rugby or American football or contact athlete, oh yeah, you've got more than enough time to tick that box with it having such an occurrence in the literature and saying that there is a high occurrence of that, then get stuck in. If it's a key injury site and a key mechanism of injury, yeah, spend some time. But yeah, that little ramble there, we're just thinking, do we need to? Okay. For most people, I think it's a bucket you should fill a little bit. For some people, it might not be worth it. The juice might not be worth the squeeze. Okay, so the overrated, underrated thing is if you never do any neck work, start doing some. If you do neck work every day, you might be putting too much worth in it, or you might not. Okay. And just bridging off from that as well, neck strength is not, it's not exclusive. Inclusive. It's not only for contact and combat sports athletes. I've definitely used it in specific cases with other sports, particularly if they've had an injury around that area in the past, or we think that a little bit of neck strength is going to aid them in their ability to control it and resist injury. So a few examples of this is climbers. Okay, so if you're a belayer and you're in the bottom position, so you're basically looking up at the wall, you're controlling the rope and you're feeding it through. If you're constantly in that super neck extended position, it can get really, really uncomfortable. And it's not very nice, and they call it belayer's neck. So having a little bit of strength, a little bit of mobility just to resist some stiffness and just control that position from an overuse standpoint makes a lot of sense. I've also used it in wheelchair sports. So I used it a little bit in wheelchair basketball. The reason why, depending on what point they were, okay, so in wheelchair basketball, you are assigned a number based on your level of disability, and the certain amount of points that you are allocated in a wheelchair basketball team is 14. So if you've got 5 players, you've got 14 points to make up. The more able-bodied you are, you could be a 5-pointer. Okay, and that might be a little bit wrong, so don't quote me on that. You could be a 5-pointer, so you've taken up a lot of the available points because you're generally going to be quite a high utility player. So somebody that is potentially an amputee, that type of thing. Whereas if you are a low pointer, you may have not a lot of core function. It might be quite high in terms of a spinal cord injury, or there might be something else going on there. So you may be lacking a little bit of core strength, okay? In which case, thinking about how they try to maneuver themselves around the chair and how posture is super important and getting from A to B, you may find that if they don't have a lot of core strength, they may use their head and their neck as essentially an extension of their core as a way of trying to balance and manage center of mass, okay? So I've used that in the past as well. So it's not just for combat or contact sports athletes, just to put that out there. That's me going off on one a little bit again. Right, so getting back to the actual topic then, okay? So we spoke about why you would do that, okay? It can help you with performance. If you're more combat orientated, it can help you with injury mitigation if you are contact or combat, okay? So looking at how I would go about this then. So I want to start with timetabling this in your week, okay? And similar to if we think about hamstrings in a sprinting based sport, football, rugby, hockey, whatever, you would not program hamstring strengthening exercises the day before a game or day before training or on the day of. Usually, okay, there are exceptions where you would. But you wouldn't do it the day before the sprinting or the super explosive activity, because when you train a muscle and you push it to a point of fatigue, you're literally doing that. You're fatiguing it. So you wouldn't want to fatigue your neck the day before or on the day of you going into a super high contact situation, So you wouldn't do it when you're about to go sparring. You wouldn't do it when you're about to do a match run through and full contact, because you've basically just weakened the structure that you're trying to strengthen to protect. So there's a timing issue here, okay? So I just want to give you a quick rule of thumb there of, if you are looking at strengthening your neck, do not do it on the day of or the day before you want your neck to be strong. Okay. Hope that makes sense. And you may be thinking about your timetable now and thinking, ooh, that's going to be difficult because I train a lot. Okay. We find that is common. Okay. If you train a lot, we need to get really clever. We need to get cute with where we put your neck training. Something to think about is putting it straight after a hard sparring day, okay, or a hard contact day, because that is essentially, you've got the longest period of time until you are training again. Let's say you train at the same time every day. Well, realistically, it makes sense to do it straight after. Okay, it might be a little bit of a faff. It might not be ideal. It might be a little bit annoying, and you know what, you can't go and have the social with the boys and all that type of stuff, or the girls. But it makes sense from a physical performance standpoint to get it done straight after the sport practice. Okay. So just take that idea and just start identifying how many opportunities in the week do you have to do a bit. Okay. If you have 5 opportunities, great. Okay. Doesn't mean you're going to do it 5 times a week. If you only have 1 opportunity in the week, which is a good period of time to do that, then we need to start being clever about it. And you might need to get a little bit more neck strength in that day just to tick all the boxes. Okay. So, or using your off season. Okay. So there's been research around the Nordic hamstring curl and Copenhagen's by maximizing your off season prep. Okay, so doing loads in the off season to really kind of raise your ability to deal with load. Okay, so you're basically getting stronger by doing a shitload of that in the actual off season. You can get away by doing very minimal amounts in the in season period. Okay, as a maintenance load, and even if it's not maintenance, even if you gradually do start decreasing over time, it's okay because you've built up this huge amount of strength that, a few months of doing a little bit less, it doesn't matter because you're still super strong. Okay. So maybe that's something you think about. Okay. How can you periodize and look at your training year as an opportunity to, okay, I'm going to smash it here because I know I'm not going to do as much down the line. Okay. Something to think about. So looking at it then, what are some of my go-tos in terms of how I structure neck training or how I think about neck training? I think of it like a pyramid. Okay. I think of it like a pyramid. I think we need to set a solid base. We need a really wide base, because then that sets the stage for future gains to sit on top of. So at the bottom of my base, all right, what I basically put in there is posture, position, and weight capacity. Okay. So that is the bottom. And what I mean by this, so posture, can they feel what a good neck position is? Okay. Do they know where neutral is for them? We don't want super extended necks where you're looking back. You don't want you to have much of a chin poke where you're reaching forward with your chin. So a forward neck posture. We don't want that. Really, if you are naturally in that position and we feel like, we can't get you out of that posture, well, then it's like we have an example of, well, maybe we just need to strengthen you in the position that you're going to find yourself in sport. But that's kind of a different topic. If we take the average person who sits pretty neutral necked, then let's strengthen you around that. So the first one, I basically approach it with an isometric block, or probably a few blocks, a few phases. So the posture, position, and weight capacity, I use neck planks as my first go-to. Okay. The reason why, it's super easy to get somebody to feel what that position needs to be. Okay. So I get them up against a wall. So if we're doing a front neck plank, which is going to strengthen the front of your neck, you're going to place your forehead or the top of your forehead up on the wall. You're going to hold a plank position. So from head to toe, you are in a straight line, glutes and abs nice and tight, little bit of a chin tuck. Okay. So not quite a full double chin, but we're getting towards that point. And we're going to hold that for time. Okay. How I go about it is I will generally do 2 to 3 sets of 20 seconds in this position. Okay. So strengthening the front. I then spin you around. You're going to go for the back neck plank, which strengthens the neck extension portion. So the back of the neck, same thing. I will go 20 seconds, 2 to 3 sets. With that, you're trying to resist, deformation. You're trying to resist what gravity and the weight of your body weight is going to do to you. Okay. So go easy-ish if it's your first time doing neck work, because it is not painful, but it does fatigue pretty quickly, and you're going to get some DOMs off the back of this. You're going to feel sore. I do it in kind of a 4 quadrants type of model. Okay. So I think about the neck being front, I think of it being back, I think of it being each side. So left and right. You're not always going to take punches or contact straight head on. Okay. Sometimes there is going to be some lateral components to that. And it makes sense to me to strengthen it in that way. The same as you would do with the core. You would think about strengthening the rectus abdominis, okay? Front core. You'd think about strengthening the back, which is the erector spinae, everything that goes on in the lower back, which generally gets strengthened with all your compounds anyway. Not always, but a lot of the time. And then you do some work for the lateral core, so your side planks and that type of thing. Same thing with the neck. That's how I think about it. So I usually split that up. If I have a lot of time, I'll split that up into 2 phases. First phase, I'll do 2 to 3 sets of 20 seconds. Then I'll do, for the second phase, 2 to 3 sets of 30 seconds. So gradually just building you up into a position where you can tolerate load, okay? Tolerate some volume. I don't hammer it, okay? I do not go, too intense straight away, because if it's generally an untrained area for most people, you don't want to kind of set them off with a neck strain, because they do put you out. They do stop you from being able to do too much. So I'm conservative, okay? So 2 phases, 20 seconds and 30 seconds. So that is your posture, position, and weight capacity block. Obviously, you can make those harder by bringing your feet a little bit further away from the wall to make the neck plank harder, so it forces you into a difficult position. The next step up then, I look at dynamic, okay? I look at dynamic movements. And generally speaking, I will do this in a weight capacity / strength style, okay? So weight capacity, I'm thinking about, can you do this for a good amount of time? Can you produce force for a good amount of time? So if we were going to program something for weight capacity and strength, we're looking at kind of 2 opposites on the continuum in a sense. Weight capacity generally going to be a little bit lower intensity, longer duration. Strength would kind of be the reverse. So how you approach that kind of depends. If you're going to go linearly, you would go weight capacity and build that into strength. But what I want you to think about as the basic premise of the dynamic phase of this pyramid is dynamic, meaning movement. Okay. So I want you to think about, if you imagine you're laying face down off the edge of a bench, your head is dangling. I want you to look and try and tuck your chin so you can look towards your toes. And then you're going to extend, trying to look up towards the sky, kind of like you're going through a downward dog, an upward dog type of movement. So we're getting full flexion, full extension, all the way up, all the way down. You're also going to take that same method, but you're going to think about dropping your ear down towards your shoulder and then back the opposite way. So you can use plates for this, you can use harnesses, but essentially you're going to think about getting movement through that joint or series of joints. Because generally, if you're going to take a punch, if you're going to be caught in a submission, if you're going to be grappling, if you're going to be caught in a ruck, a scrum, or whatever, you're not always going to be neutral, okay? Probably more often times than not, I don't think you will be neutral. I think you'll be away from that perfect aligned position. So it makes sense for me to try and gain strength through that. Okay. There's also going to be a lot of benefits for hypertrophy by taking it through a range of motion. So thinking back to what Colin said around smaller necks is generally going to be an increased risk. Let's get some hypertrophy. Let's build some mass around that neck to help with the shock absorbing nature of it and just be able to control head position a little bit more. So that's one of the things I do. I call them plate neck extensions. So just plate, laying face up on a bench, put a plate on your forehead or a dumbbell or whatever. You can put a towel between it just so it's not uncomfortable and just take it through the range of motion. So that's one way you can train dynamic. Another way that you can train dynamic is thinking about actual rotation. Okay, so thinking about if you're going to keep your shoulders facing forward, turn your head to the left, turn your head to the right. That is dynamic in nature as well. And that is something that's super important because you will have rotational forces going through your head and your neck at certain periods of training and life. Okay. So you want to be strong in those positions. You don't just want to be strong neutrally. Think about twisting. You can use cable machines. There is specialist equipment, particularly an iron neck. They're quite expensive, I believe. Maybe like, I'm going to throw a random number out there, but £200 to £500. If you train boxers and you get a lot of people coming to your gym, and it's worth having, it probably is really worth it. I've never used one, so I can't really comment, but they do look cool, and I do think they will tick the box, and you could probably rig your own, to be honest with you. So thinking about dynamic then, explore ranges of motion that typically the neck can do. It can do a lot, okay? So you're not going to be able to tick all these boxes in one day or even in one phase. So you're going to have to think about gradually working through an order of priority and weighing up where it sits, okay? And that is a little bit of S&C in general. Nobody knows really that an injury is going to happen, but we've got a series of clues based off injury occurrence research and looking at the sport. You've got a series of clues there of, okay, this is a high likelihood of injury. Okay, put loads of weight in that. That's a low likelihood of injury. Okay, I might touch that every once in a while. I might fill that bucket every once in a while just to kind of maintain. Same thing with the dynamic stuff, really, in my thoughts. Okay, so what you're thinking about there is weight capacity. Okay, I'd probably do that for a phase with some dynamic work and then build that into some actual strength work as well. So thinking a little bit heavier reps, 5 reps, 6 reps, 7 reps, 8 reps, 9 reps, whatever it is. But generally, we're thinking about gradually increasing the load over time to actually improve the ability of the neck to produce force. And to be honest with you, you could probably make crazy amounts of progress from a strength perspective, particularly if you're untrained in this area. On the first bit with posture, position, and weight capacity, you would make strength gains for a long, long time. Then you'd go into the dynamic and make strength gains for a long, long time doing the weight capacity stuff. And you might not even need to go into the actual strength work for a long period of time. But I'm just giving you these my thoughts, and then you can build from that. So another thing to think about then, I kind of touched on this previously, so I'm kind of jumping back, is isometrics in general. Okay, so thinking about isometric strength, meaning that the joint doesn't move, the muscle length doesn't move. You generally get about 15 to 30 degrees of strength carryover. Okay, what I mean by that is if you're going to strengthen yourself in a neutral head position, so just looking straight forward, as neutral as you can get, okay, great. If you just tilt your head a little bit to one side, there's going to be a point at which you go past that 30 degrees. You're probably not going to have strength in that end range position from doing the isometric strength stuff. You know, what that means is that it does matter. Your position and your joint angles do matter. You couldn't just do a quarter squat with a bar on your back and hope that it's going to carry over into the bottom of a deep, deep squat. That's not how it works, okay? So knowing that strength is specific to the range of motion that you're trying to train, let's think about that a little bit more. I've spoke about dynamic, about trying to create strength in multiple ranges. When I get towards the top of my pyramid, when I'm starting to think about probably, I say advanced, but it's not really what I mean by it. It's not like it's superior in any way, shape or form, but this is probably getting to the super nuance of it. I do program what I would call worst case scenario neck planks. Okay. So what a worst case scenario neck plank is, taking you to close to your end range. Okay. So if we think about the side neck plank that I spoke about before, so kind of dropping your ear, thinking about, going on your side, what I would do in a worst case scenario neck plank, okay, is literally put you in a situation when your ear is dropping towards your shoulder, okay? So we're getting length through one side of the neck and we're getting a really short position on the other side, okay? And you'll hold that in your neck plank position. And the reason why I choose neck planks for that is because you can control it, okay? You can gradually use hand support if you need to. And I really like that because you will end up in funky positions. If I think back to jiu-jitsu, wrestling, MMA, you're going to end up against a cage. And if you don't have a little bit of strength through there, potentially you can't get out of that position, but you're going to be at an increased likelihood of strains, okay? So worst case scenario stuff is probably a little bit out there. Some people might be like, ooh, that feels like it's a little bit extreme. Yeah, potentially. But exercise is only really risky if you progress it wrongly, in my opinion. I've had huge success with that, and people generally feel like they have a lot more mobility around their neck off the back of that. Okay. So worst case scenario stuff, I do think has its place, right? I generally don't really go further than the neck planks with the worst case scenario stuff. I have seen people doing, so if we think about the neck planks being yielding, okay, so you are resisting gravity where you're holding a position. I've seen people basically being put into a worst case scenario position. So somebody holding their neck into, ear against shoulder, holding their position there, and then somebody is trying to bring themselves back to neutral. And that is an overcoming isometric. I've seen those being done. I haven't personally played with them myself. I haven't done them. I see the worth 100%. If I did more, if I had an athlete who I was working with face to face and that was appropriate for them at that time, I would definitely do that. Another thing, so top of the pyramid, is thinking about rate of force development. Okay, so we spoke throughout this about building weight capacity, creating a strong neck. Okay, and what we essentially want to try and think about towards the top of the pyramid as well is, can you switch on your neck quickly? Okay, if you're going to think about you're going to take a tackle or a punch or get slammed, something along those lines, the resistance and the shock and the whiplash effect happens super quick. It doesn't take 5 seconds to build up. It generally takes, not a long time at all. So you want to think about, can you train your neck to be reactive in a sense? Okay, can you make your neck fast to switch on, fast to switch off? So we're thinking about, if you listened to a few of my podcasts before, I'll speak about the oscillatory nature. Rate of force development is how quickly can you get strong. That is the other bit to it. Okay. Another way a few ways that you would train this rate of force development piece then. Okay. So first one is, get yourself in a scenario where potentially against a squat rack and you've got a yoga block. Okay, you're holding your head against the yoga block, which is against the rack. You're holding your body super close to that rack. And what you're going to do is literally push your head in towards the yoga block quickly. Okay, so you're going to try and build up from 0 to 100% in 0.5 of a second. And you might do 6 to 10 reps of that. So switch on, switch off, switch on, switch off. And I think there's a lot of worth in that. I would gradually build up to that point, building up over 5 seconds. Again, doing that for front, back, and sides, just so you're building up strength in a variety of positions. You can also play around with drop catches. So I've done this on cable machines before. So if you've got a neck harness, you can literally just drop the weight. So pull it forward, drop it with your hand, and then it's going to put a certain amount of jolting force through the neck. Be careful with this. Definitely not something you want to rush into, because that jolt, and if you're not used to it, and that quick switching on, that could be the mechanism of injury if you rush it too soon. Okay, but be gradual with your approaches, be conservative. So what we've gone through there then is quite a lot. Okay, I'm coming up on 30 minutes of neck chat here. What I want us to think about here is, what is your start point? Okay, realistically, is thinking about, do you need neck work in your program? Okay, are you a higher risk population? Do you play those sports that we spoke about? If yes, cool. Let's look about getting some form of strengthening work in there. Look at your timetable. Where do you have an opportunity, factoring in that you do not want to weaken your neck before it needs to be strong? Okay. Once you've thought about that, let's think about, what is your start point? Okay, we spoke about posture, position, and weight capacity. And a little bit of a thing around that is movement as well. Do you have the mobility to hit good positions? Do you constantly have a stiff neck? Okay, in which case you're probably going to need to start loosening that up as well as part of that base. So think about rotations, flexion, extension, just get some good quality mobility through the neck. Once you've ticked the posture, position, weight capacity off, move through some dynamic pieces. Okay, then we can start working towards the top of the pyramid. So worst case scenario, rate of force development, overcoming isometrics, right? Throughout all of this, you can do it in an isolated nature. Okay. You can literally just strengthen the neck, or you can start to include other body positions in this. Look towards a classic wrestler, okay, who might do more wrestler bridges, and you can definitely find progressions and regressions with that. You can get partners involved to provide some external resistance, potentially in like a bear crawl position. You'll see that. You can play around with that, and you'll have a ton of success with it as well. So yeah, that is essentially the framework that I work from. That doesn't explain it all. There's obviously an element of context with this and how you apply it to your specific situation, factoring in what your start point is. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up then. So quick plug to the Adapt online S&C coaching service. If you are a contact or combat sports athlete that's looking for somebody to come in and just make you an all-out beast, an absolute unit, do it in an extremely evidence-based way. We're not going to wing it. Everything is done with evidence behind it to make sure that we are making a really appropriate decision for you and where you're at. Give us a shout, okay? Drop us a message, drop us an email, head to our website, which is www.adaptstrength.co.uk. Head there or go in the show notes below, send us an inquiry, and we're going to change your life. All right, we're going to change your life. Right then, so without further ado, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time. If you enjoyed this episode and you thought there was something that was thought-provoking, or you think somebody may benefit from this, send it to a friend, share it with somebody on social media. I appreciate it, and I will speak to you soon.